Just before we do, I just want to say hello and welcome to you all. Thank you for signing up and taking the time to sign on. Take the time out of your day, whenever that is. I'm here in the northeast of England. It's the late afternoon, or rather bright autumnal afternoon. There's just myself and Sally the dog, who is behind me, sleeping on the couch, who I hope is not going to be disturbed into a fit of yapping by any passers-by or anything like that. If you hear any squealing and yelping in the background, that'll be Sally, not me. But hopefully she usually manages to sleep through just about everything. So going to get started. So let's get this going. So this webinar is called Uncover Your Limitations, how to easily identify some of your limiting beliefs. So basically, this webinar is for people who want to identify their limiting beliefs, things that they think are holding them back, ideas that don't serve them, don't help them, don't support them in whatever it is they're doing. It could also be for people who work with other people and who want to use the same kind of ideas to find out other people's limiting beliefs. So for example, if you're a coach or a therapist, you might find this technique helpful. But my aim in developing it and presenting it was to give people a way of uncovering their own identifying limiting beliefs, which can be a little bit tricky. So the webinar, I think, will probably be about half an hour long, something like that. It'll include a brief introduction to limiting beliefs, what they are and why they're so much of a nuisance. And then I'll take you through a simple technique for identifying some of yours so you can apply your technique of choice to working with them. That might be tapping, or it might be some other approach. So that's what you're going to get that's what I've got lined up for today. So here we go. And it's not exactly audience participation, but I'm going to invite you to work along with me to try the process out. So go on in the privacy of your own home so that you won't have to say anything or type anything to describe what's going on. But you'll need two things if you want to try this process out. And that's a situation where you feel stuck, where you think limiting beliefs might be at work, and pen and paper, or pencil and paper, some kind of writing implement or equipment. So if you got some of that to hand, that'd be really useful. You have a couple of minutes to find that before we get into the process itself. So if you want to join in, please feel free. Okay. So what exactly is a limiting belief? People talk about them a lot. And people have all sorts of different ideas about what limiting beliefs are. So I want to give you my take on what a limiting belief is. And my definition is quite simple, really. And that is that a limiting belief is an unhelpful idea held in place by a feeling. So there's a kind of a thought that is given, an unhelpful thought that is given some sense of truth by the feeling that goes with it. It's the feeling that makes it kind of seem convincing or real, because if it didn't seem real, then it would be just a bunch of words. So, and what kind of unhelpful ideas could they be? Well, they could be unhelpful ideas about the way the world works, how the world works. And these often start off with the word if, actually, so it's kind of quite common. People say things like, if I speak up, people won't like me. You yourself say that, or you hear somebody say that, what that's saying is, in their mind's eye or in their worldview, speaking up has an unpleasant consequence. Now, it may or may not have that consequence. It's just an idea that feels true. It may not be true at all. So that's one. This is kind of like how the world works, what happens, what are the consequences of things. The next one is kind of what things mean, or what's kind of linked with what. For example, if might have the idea that, say, rich people are nasty. So, which, if you don't want to be nasty, is a good reason not to make money. Now, is that true? well, sometimes it might be true, sometimes it isn't true. There's a kind of a linkage to kind of what things mean, what things are equal. And the next one is beliefs about who we are or how we are in the world. So ideas like I'm a failure would come into this category, or I'm no good at this, or those kind of statements about our identity, who we are, how we are in the world. There are beliefs about what's possible, things like, I can't do this, it's impossible to do this, there's no way I could do this. There's a kind of an idea around the limitations we have as humans, limitations we have as the persons, of what we can do. And the last one is kind of, that I put in here, and probably other categories as well, it's kind of like beliefs about what's important. Like, for example, if you have the idea that it's important not to upset anybody, that's an important thing for you, then it gets kind of difficult to speak up because you run the risk of upsetting somebody. So it's kind of like ideas about values or beliefs about what's important may kind of limit us in what we can do. So those are limiting beliefs. So you're probably already guessing how this is going here, but I'm going to ask the question, so what's the problem in having a limiting belief? So what's wrong with limiting beliefs? And the first one, I think, is that limiting beliefs are kind of like blinkers. They kind of restrict your field of view, your field of perception. Because beliefs tend to be self-confirming, they automatically filter out ideas that contradict the belief. So it's kind of like the belief changes what you can perceive in the world. Like if you're running the belief, I am a failure, then the chances are that you're very susceptible or very aware of your own failures, but kind of completely miss your successes. It's as if the belief kind of filters out stuff from our experience, stuff that would kind of give a much richer picture of the world. What's the next one? There we go. So it's kind of expectations. It's kind of like what you expect from life. What are your predictions for the future? So if you're running I am a failure, if you have that as a limiting belief, then the chances are that your predictions about the future are going to be fairly gloomy, because that belief kind of gives you the idea that things are not going to go well for you, things are going to be a struggle, things are going to be hard. So you already have an expectation of how things are going to be. So it's kind of difficult to have expectations of a happy future or a successful future if you have the idea that kind of like I am a failure. It kind of poisons your expectations, if you like. The other thing is that kind of beliefs give us permissions or deny us permission to do things. They kind of, if you have the belief I'm a failure, it gives you permission to fail. Permission to fail guaranteed. Permission to succeed, that's kind of mitigated against by kind of limiting beliefs. So limiting beliefs will kind of give you permission not to do things, or kind of like stop you from doing things. Things that other people might find easy, you find it quite difficult. So the beliefs kind of give you permission or deny permission to act in the world. And if you want to get on, or you want to have some sort of success, whatever that means to you, then you have to be able to do things, act and move in the world. So those are three kind of problems with limiting beliefs. Now, just before we get on things, I want to make one point about limiting beliefs, 2 points about limiting beliefs, and that is how they work. How I've entitled this "How They Work," and the picture on the left, the handcuffs. I'm going to go back when I first started down this line of inquiry. I started did an NLP practitioner back in 1999, I think. I kind of had the idea that I would have just the one limiting belief, to be one limitation, and then some supremely masterful NLP practitioner or master practitioner would know exactly what that one thing was and would kind of break it for me. and I'd be free. My handcuffs would fall away, the scales would drop from my eyes, the heavenly choir would start to sing, and I'd be free, and I'd live happily ever after. So far, that's never happened, I have to confess. It is possible, I think, there might just be one limiting belief that holds everything in place. I think it's much more likely to be that if you're held in place or you feel stuck or blocked by limitations or beliefs, that's much more likely to be a spider's web, a collection of limiting beliefs that hold you firmly in place. Not one large one, but lots and lots, a mesh, a belief system, if you like, that holds you back. And that part of this work here is to kind of dismantle the web, if you like. If you go back to Gulliver's Travels, you remember Gulliver's Travels, Gulliver wakes up on the beach on Lilliput after being shipwrecked and finds to his surprise that he can't actually move. And he's kind of trying to figure out what's going on here, and it feels like he's paralyzed almost. And he looks down and he sees that he's been kind of tied up, basically, tied to the ground in what to him appear to be just strands of cotton. But to the Lilliputians who found this giant on the beach, they have tied him down with the biggest ropes they can find. And they've kind of tied him in place. But for him, it's kind of like he's been tied by this net of very fine threads that are quite difficult to break. And I think that most people, this is an opinion alert, this is my opinion, so I think most people have actually been Gullivered, which is to say they've been tied down with lots and lots of different interlinking, interwoven limiting beliefs. So we're kind of stuck in the web rather than handcuffed to something. Now, that's my kind of personal opinion, but everything I do works on this presupposition of we're in this web. So the question is how to kind of find out the web and what to do about it. Well, there's one other problem with limiting beliefs, and that's because they are so familiar to us. We look out at the world through our belief system, through our limiting beliefs, and we can't actually see. We can't see them. You can see through them, but you can't see them. They're so much embedded in the fabric of our understanding that it's impossible for us to see them. We look through them. They're glasses that we look through into the world, but we're not aware that we're looking through glasses. Now, on the outside, we're on the outside of this poor chap here. We can see the glasses. We can see that they look somewhat suspect. They certainly look suspect on a dog. They probably look equally suspect on a human. But we can see them. That's because we have the benefit of being on the outside. But from the inside, we don't know. We don't know what they are. They're very hard to spot because they're so familiar to us, so deeply ingrained. So then the question is, how could you find out your limiting beliefs? If you can't see them very easily, how could you find them out? How could you get some kind of idea what they were so you could work with them? Because the actual business of changing a limiting belief is not that difficult. The tricky bit is finding them in the first place. So one way is to have somebody else find them. That is, you go to a therapist, or you go to a coach, or you have a good friend who spots these beliefs as they come out of your mouth, the perfectly innocent things you think you're saying, and somebody picks up and says, so you mean this. You hear yourself saying this. So it's kind of like people are trained, coaches, therapists, like myself, have some training and experience in picking these things up. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to try out other people's limiting beliefs. And by that I mean you can kind of, I found this certainly, I've kind of read things and I thought, oh my goodness, that applies to me. I recognize that. And it's kind of like seeing it on the outside of myself that let me know it's there. If you do EFT and you use tapping scripts, then oftentimes you'll find things in tapping scripts that people are giving you stuff to try out and tap and think, oh my God, yes, that applies to me. I would never have thought about it, but now it's written down. Yep, I can see that's true. That's possible. So another way is then how can we If we don't have the benefit of a therapist, we don't have a benefit of somebody else has managed to sum up our limiting beliefs for us, how can we bring them to this, coax them to the surface, which is the purpose of this webinar, is to kind of find a way of kind of bringing them up to the surface so that you can work with them. Well, there's one way that doesn't work, and that's to ask why things are stuck. Asking why. If you have a kind of difficult situation, if you're stuck, asking the question why doesn't help. And I think there are two reasons for this. First of all, if somebody asks you why you've done something, that may provoke defensiveness. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I made lots of mistakes. I did stupid things, I did things wrong, and my mum would call me and she would use my first name in that particular way that mothers have that let you know you've done something wrong. And then they would say, why did you do that? So it's a bit of a kind of a stressful situation. So it's kind of like, how can I come up with an excuse? What can I say that will pacify the people who are asking me why? So there's a whole kind of defensive tone around that. So when people get asked why something, and you may experience this if somebody asks, why did you do that? A kind of defensiveness comes up. That's not very helpful if you're trying to uncover limiting beliefs. If you get into a defensive, closed down state, it's not a very good way of accessing unconscious or out of conscious material. So that's one reason why doesn't help. The second reason is that it's a kind of invitation to our inner storyteller to make something up. We all seem to have inside us a kind of narrator to our life history that comes up with a story to try and make sense of all the things that happen to us. So it's a kind of, and it's quite a well-known psychological phenomenon. When things happen to us, we kind of make up some sort of narrative that helps things fit in our experience. So when you ask somebody why something happened, they have to go into themselves and come up with a story, some story or other, to make something up. And the trouble with that is that the story comes from within the beliefs. You're seeing the story through these same belief classes. So the story that comes up may or may not be very useful. So why is not a good way to go? Well, not in this context anyway. So then the question is, how can we coax limiting beliefs up to the surface? So most of our limiting beliefs operate at an unconscious level. They guide us, they give us permission, they deny us permission. All this is going on below the surface of our conscious mind, usually at a level where we can't actually see them. So what we need is some way to draw these limiting beliefs up to the surface so that we can spot them. So to bring them from the depths, the murky depths of our unconscious other than conscious mind, up to the surface so that we can spot them. And once we've spotted them, we can work on them. And the way, or one of the ways that I like to use for uncovering these limiting beliefs is just a one word, actually. It's a very useful word, a very familiar word. That word is because. Because is a great word, because it appears a lot, and the word because points to causes of things. If somebody gives you a sentence that includes because, the bit after the because will tell you something about how they understand the world works. So for example, here's a really simple one. It's snowing because it's cold. It's a fairly straightforward idea. Snowing because it's cold. Because it's cold is causing it to snow. So the it's cold is a kind of in this case it's maybe a fact about the world, but it's also a belief about the world. Here's one. I can't get that job because I'm too old. Now the bit after because here is a belief that I'm too old for that particular job. That might be in fact that that job isn't available to very old people, but in most cases this kind of statement, I'm too old, is a statement of belief. Here's another one. I'm avoiding the presentation which is the situation, because I will make a fool of myself. So the problem here is avoiding the presentation, and one of the beliefs that goes with that was kind of contributing to the avoidance of the presentation is I will make a fool of myself. Okay, so think about one more. My business is failing. Has a typo in it. My business is failing because nobody is interested in my products. So once again, the problem is my business is failing, and the because is nobody's interested in my products. So when people say because, they're kind of pointing you towards the beliefs that they have running about that situation. Does that make sense so far? If you kind of type in, if you have any questions about that, if you could type them into the little kind of comments box, or is that all clear so far? Just give me a little pause for me to have a quick slurp of water and for you to have a comment or ask any questions. I should take silence as being assent. Okay. All right. So far, we've got, you can continue. Oh, thank you. Thanks, John. All clear so far. Very good. All right. So what we've got here is how the word because pops up in everyday life. People will say something about the situation, then they'll give you a because, then they'll say something that may probably or may possibly be a belief, a limiting belief, or any other kind of belief. So that's how people use because in the normal course of conversation. But we can use the word because to our advantage as a kind of a way of getting into what's underneath the surface of a problem. We can use our kind of natural tendency to want to complete or make a whole sentence, if the word because appears to make a whole sentence, to make it make sense. So I'm going to kind of take you into this process now, and part one of the process, and I'm going to invite you to do this, is actually to pick a situation. I invite you to kind of pick your own situation with this, so you can try this out in real time. So pick a situation in your experience where you feel stuck, or if you have some kind of pattern of behavior that repeats itself, or one when you suspect that something is going on beneath the surface but you don't know what it is. Those would be kind of indications that there's a kind of a belief at work somewhere in there. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples of situations. So things like I can't lose weight, or my business is failing, or nobody is hiring me. Something, it's kind of a statement of a situation that's kind of problematic, troublesome, something that's stuck or repetitive. So you're going to need one of those. Okay. And very shortly, you're going to need a piece of paper and a pen. So if you want to do it, you can do the process in your mind, but it's very useful to write things down. Okay, so that's the first step, picking a situation. Part two is what I think of as bringing in the harvest, which is to say, what we want to do is to kind of invite the unconscious mind to come up with all the possibilities, all the limitations that may revolve around this situation. Now, here, what we're after is getting as many different possibilities as possible. We'll do the sorting, we'll do the sifting later, identifying what's useful, but here we're going for quantity. Okay? And the process is very simple. So what I'd want you to do is, I'll show you the first part of the process. Here we go. Is to have a sentence, the situation, whatever your situation is. So, for example, I can't lose weight, or my business is failing, or no one is hiring me, something like that. So it would be, I can't lose weight because, and then I'd just like you to complete the sentence. So when you hear that, when you name your situation, add the word because, and then just write down what springs to mind. So if it's doing like I can't lose weight because I'm a glutton, for example. Whatever comes to mind, write it down. the situation because. Okay, so just write that down. Write the first one that comes down. Then do it again. I can't because. Situation, whatever it is, because. And again, the situation because. And again, the situation, whatever it is, because. And keep doing that. Just keep completing the because sentence, and just keep going until either the well runs dry and run out of ideas, or you start to repeat yourself. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to write out as many becauses as you can. Okay. Now, I don't know if you're doing that, because I can't tell from here, but I'm just going to carry on doing it. If you've still got a few things to go, just carry on doing it. I'm going to give you some tips, because this is actually in some ways, this is the trickiest part of the process. So there are some ways of doing it that you'll find make things easier. So the first one is go fast. When you're completing the sentence, the situation because, go as fast as you can. The faster you go, the more you allow the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind, however you want to call that, to come up with information. To come up with things. So you go very fast because blah, 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 because blah, 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 whatever it is. The next thing is to be honest. Sometimes the mind will come up with all sorts of things that are, how can I say, not very flattering, not very good for our egos, disconcerting, the kind of thing that perhaps you wouldn't normally think in polite conversation. So, but it's your job to be honest and to write everything down, which leads me to the next point. And that is collect everything. Write everything down. However trivial it seems, how silly it seems, just write the whole lot down. Make as big a collection as you can. And lastly, to go along with all this, don't stop to think. Just keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, until you either run out of things to say or you start repeating yourself. If you stop to think at each one, what you'll do is you'll think of the because, you'll stop, and then you go into ruminate. Is this, I wonder how this happened. Oh, I wonder if this is a good one or not. This is a bit embarrassing. So what you do is you stop the process of uncovering stuff, because you've got into the position of, if you remember the picture with all the fish circling around in the tank, you've got into the mistake of fixing on one fish, whereas you want to get as many as possible. Okay. How's that? Managed to get some, if you've been doing it, have you managed to get some, does that make sense in terms of the process so far? And if you could just tap in the chat box just to let me know how you're doing with that. Okay. Excuse me. That's plenty of stuff come up. Oh yes. Oh yes indeed. I've oftentimes this does come up with a huge amount of material, and I think on a couple of occasions I've managed to fill a side of A4, each line of a different thing. Some similar, some very different. So yes, there's a lot of stuff in there sometimes, and there's kind of a lot of stuff to come out. And that's provided a huge wealth of information, if you like, which kind of brings us on to the next step, actually. So we kind of brought in the harvest. And if you were a peasant back in the not so good old days, and you just brought in the harvest, you would have a collection of wheat, which would be stalks and leaves and seeds and grains and bits and pieces of all sorts of stuff. And your next job would be to sort the wheat from the chaff. That is to kind of get the grains, things you actually want from the harvest, and junk the rest. So the next piece of the process is actually a lot simpler than the second piece. So I'm going to show you some results from session kind of answering the question, I can't lose weight because. Okay, so here's a list of things that may have come up or may come up in somebody's mind when they're kind of, I can't lose weight because. Okay, so here's the list. I can't stop myself eating. I'm addicted to food. I'm addicted to bread. I can't help myself. I don't want to, that is, I don't want to lose weight. I've tried and I always put weight back on. So here's a kind of collection of beliefs, ideas. Now, when you're writing it down, you don't really know which of these is good or useful or true beliefs and what is just a kind of driftwood of the mind. Just some kind of random junk that floats around inside consciousness. So we need to kind of do a bit of sorting. And the way you sort, very simply, is just to, for each one, read the sentence aloud and give it a score between 0 and 10, where 0 is that's just a bunch of words and 10 is as true as it could be or as intense as it could feel. So for example, I can't stop myself eating. 8 out of 10. I'm addicted to food. No, 0. Must have been just something floating around in the person's head at the time. I'm addicted to bread. 6. Not quite as true as 8, but still fairly true. I can't help myself. 10, which is to say, in this case, kind of completely 100% true. Okay, so that's obviously quite a strong belief then. I don't want to lose weight. No, 0. No charge on that at all. I've tried and I always put weight back on, and that's an 8. So now in this kind of small selection, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beliefs, 2 of which are just kind of just a bunch of words that were floating in consciousness and were written down, and then 4 that have beliefs attached. So there's a 6, 2 8s, and a 10. So now you have an idea of what beliefs are actually operating, what beliefs are true in this context, and also how strong they are. And my assumption about this would be that the strongest ones are the ones that are most worth taking care of. Does that make sense as a process? Just read the sentence, give it a score. Okay, so what I'm going to invite you to do is just spend a few moments reading through your lists, if you've done this exercise so far, and give each one a score. And see how they stack up. If you have a lot of neutrals, you have a lot of really strong ones, or if you have a spread across the board. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay. And once again, I'm not sure if you've been doing this, going along, and what you've found. But I'd be kind of curious to know if you found any patterns or interesting ones, surprises, that kind of stuff. You don't need to say what the beliefs are, just to say that kind of like you've got some hits from using the process. I'd be interested to see that. So if you could type, just give us a little note in the chat box at the bottom. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move on to the last piece, which is part 4, which is actually now you've got some targets, you have to process the limiting beliefs. So you've got some things to work with there. Now, if you're a tapper, then I guess you're going to be using tapping processes. And you've got a couple of possibilities. You can use the standard tapping, which is just tapping on the statements. You kind of work your way to kind of soften the strength of the belief. Or you could look for the events where you learnt the belief that you've got, if you know what that is. Perhaps some memory has come to mind letting you know where this belief was learnt, so you can tap on the causal events, or the core events, if you like. Or you could use some kind of reframing process, which we kind of see in tapping steps, a reframing process. Or you could use some of the things that I've come up with that you can find on my website, and that I've done the presentations or pieces about, like the belief flip is one, exception tapping is another, paradoxical tapping, which is a kind of another variation of tapping that I've got. So you could use those three to kind of dissolve beliefs, tackle the beliefs. Or you could use your favorite method. I mean, whatever it might be, tapping, NLP, some other kind of process, that's absolutely fine. So you can use your process of choice, really, for the belief. You have your list of things to tap on, and now you have to actually do the hard bit, which is kind of doing the work to neutralize that belief, so kind of do some tapping on that. Okay, so any questions so far? Is that kind of fairly straightforward? Any questions about the process itself, or any comments about the process itself? Chance to comment on that. Oh, very interesting to write that down. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to say a couple of things now. As you can use this, different ways of using this process. You can use it for something you're trying to do and you're not getting things done. Then this is kind of a useful process to find out what the blocks are, what the beliefs are. So you can kind of use this on a kind of a one at a time sort of situations. What I would suggest is that it's really interesting to kind of use this in lots of different situations where you feel stuck. And that if you do that, is that you keep notes. I kind of, when I'm using this stuff, I kind of type up what I've said and just make a little bit of space here to type type up the notes. So I've got a record of what I've worked on and the various beliefs that came up. And one of the things you can do with the notes is to kind of start looking for patterns. What kind of beliefs are operating over time? What kind of your favorite limiting beliefs? Are you big on impossibilities? This is impossible, I can't do this. Or are the beliefs that involve kind of fear of success or fear of failure? This is going to kind of start to point you towards various themes in your life, in the way that you work with situations, with in the context of your life. So it's kind of like fear a big theme, there's impossibility a big theme, judgment of others a big theme. And that kind of can point you in ways that are very profitable areas to work if you're very interested in your own self-development. This is a way of pointing yourself towards areas where you can make huge gains in your experience. So as well as being a kind of one-off thing, it's a very helpful part of self-development process if you have to have one of those things. So we're nearly done, and I just have a couple of extra, just two more things to say really, and that is if you need some more help on this, if you want a kind of written explanation of the process and some of the other things, the exception tapping and the paradoxical tapping and the belief flip stuff. This one, you can go to my website. There's an article about this whole process, how to find limiting beliefs in just one word, which is all about this process. There are articles about the exception tapping and the rest of it. There's also two books that I've written. One is Getting Out of Your Own Way, which is a more kind of in-depth exploration of limiting beliefs, how they work, and how to uncover them in different kind of classes of limiting beliefs. And the other book is the EFT collection, which is a collection of the EFT change processes, 12 tapping techniques for practical well-being. So you can find either of those on my website, www.practicalwellbeing.co.uk, in either paper format or in electronic PDF format. So please check those out if you're interested in this. And that's the end of the shameless plug. I'm trying to keep it nice and short. Okay, last chance. If there are any questions, anything, any comments, suggestions, ideas, things that you'd like to know about before we wrap up this webinar. So last chance for a question. Unless, of course, you email one to me afterwards, which is perfectly fine as well. Okay. Thank you so far. Very welcome so far. Okay, so here we go. I will visit. Excellent. Okay, so I'll need to say thank you very much for attending. I appreciate you being here. It's always nice to speak to somebody. It's a very nice part of this whole webinar process. I hope you found the information useful. If you have any questions about it, any queries about it, then please drop me a line at andy@practicalwellbeing.co.uk and I'll do my best to give you an intelligent answer.